Today we're going to be replacing the clutch on my E93 M3. First, we need to remove the skid plate and the plastic covering up front. The next step is to unplug the O2 sensors and remove the exhaust. Finally got the exhaust removed. It was a pain in the ass, had 4 bolts break on me, but now we can start removing the drive shaft from the transmission. Next, we've removed this heat shielding to get to the drive shaft. We can now unbolt the drive shaft from the transmission, and then we'll unbolt the center support. We now have the drive shaft disconnected. Probably should remove that heat shield back there before you start. But you remove the 3 bolts here connecting the drive shaft to the flex plate and the center bolts, and then you pull straight down on the drive shaft and it will disconnect from the flex plate there. Next, we'll be removing the transmission cross member. We have to support the transmission, and then we can remove the cross member and get the drive shaft out of the way. We can start taking everything off the transmission. We're going to take the oil cooler lines off, start taking all the electrical lines off. You won't be able to get this wiring harness completely off out of its hooks up there. There's one more connection. We'll worry about the clutch slave cylinder. There's 2 bolts on holding that on. We'll worry about that after we take off the cross member and let the transmission tilt a little bit. There's a bracket here that I took off. So I'm going to take the rest of the items off, and then we'll take the cross member off and start to tilt the transmission so that we can get access to the top bolts on the bell housing. We now need to remove the shifter from the transmission. There's a clip here that I've already removed, and then this slides out. There are 2 clips inside here and over here. Take a flathead and you pop these off, and then there's pins that you pull out. I removed the transmission oil cooler lines. The transmission supported with a jack. We can now start unbolting the bell housing. Finally got the transmission out. It was the absolute worst. Getting the top of this to clear the firewall was a real pain. You had to lift like the back of the transmission to swoop it out, and then the input shaft would contact the clutch fingers so to get the exact right angle. But now we can move on to taking off the clutch. Got the clutch out, about 6 hex screws. I got them out with an impact gun. You can see the clutch is pretty low. It's almost at those screws or whatever these are. Now that the clutch is off, we can remove the flywheel. There are T55 bolts holding the flywheel off. We're going to use the impact to get them off, and then we're going to be able to pull out the pilot bearing here. I couldn't get the flywheel bolts loose, so we're just going to leave the bearing for now. There's no place side to side. It rotates fine, so we're just going to use the old one. While we have the transmission out, I'm going to be replacing the check valves. Both sides, they're difficult to get to with the transmission in, so while we have the transmission out, make it a lot easier to replace them now. I got the passenger side check valve off. The bolt on the outside is pretty hard to get to. The top and bottom aren't too bad now that the transmission's out. On the driver's side check valve, I can't get the outside bolt off, so we're just going to leave that one on. Not sure what I can do. I don't think I'll be able to get to it from the top either, so we're just going to leave the old one on and maybe we'll coat it out with a tune. Got the new clutch on, got all the bolts torqued down, got the clutch alignment tool in here, and we're good to go. Rolled the transmission in on a creeper, clutch is torqued down. So next we got to get the transmission on the jack and lift it back up into place. Got the transmission back on the jack, now time to raise it up. Got the transmission all bolted up, got most of the plugs put in, cross members in, drive shaft is bolted up. Next we're going to be filling it up with transmission fluid. I guess Redline MTL is a little bit thicker, and in cold weather you can have a little bit more friction when shifting. This is a little bit thinner than MTL, so it helps in colder climates. To get this fluid into the transmission, I have a little pump that I bought off Amazon. You put the hose in the fill hole and pump this fluid in. We're fast forwarding a little bit. I got the transmission fluid in the transmission, got the exhaust bolted up, and all the underbody panels bolted up. In the car, again, test out the clutch pedal feel. Feeling good. Shifting good. All right, we're ready for a test drive. Just took the car for a test drive. The clutch engagement feels good. Transmission shifts smoothly. Everything's good. No vibrations, no weird sounds. I think we're good to go. It was a success.